Okay, so today we're diving into a true crime story. But I want you to forget about masked robbers and bank vaults for a second. This heist, well, it involves a government program, a global pandemic, and a price tag in the hundreds of billions dollars. This is the wild story of the Employee Retention Credit, a program that started as a lifeline and somehow got twisted into one of the biggest scams in U.S. history.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? How on earth did a program with such noble intentions, something born from the chaos of 2020, become this massive magnet for fraud on a scale that's just hard to even wrap your head around? To figure that out, we've got to break down the whole operation.
Our story really unfolds in 5 parts. First, we'll look at the lifeline itself, what it was supposed to do. Then, we'll pinpoint the exact moment the vault door was basically left unlocked. After that, we'll watch the scammers storm in, see how the detectives are fighting back, and finally, we'll sort through the fallout of it all. So let's start at the very beginning. We got to go back to those early, really uncertain days of the pandemic. The government knew it had to do something, and fast, to stop the economy from completely collapsing. And out of that urgency, the ERC was born. The idea behind it was actually pretty simple. The ERC was a tax credit designed to reward businesses for not laying people off during all the shutdowns. The deal was basically, hey, you keep your people on the payroll and we'll help you cover the costs. And for tons of legitimate small businesses, it was exactly what it was supposed to be, a genuine lifeline. Now, when the program first launched back in March 2020, the rules were surprisingly strict. A business could get a 50% credit on an employee's wages, sure, but that was capped at 10 grand for the entire year. So the absolute most you could get was $5,000 per employee, and you had to prove you really needed it. Either your operations were shut down or your revenue got cut in half. It started out as a very controlled, very targeted program. But, as the pandemic just kept dragging on, Congress wanted to do more to help. And in the process of trying to do that, they unintentionally created the exact vulnerabilities that would get exploited later. This is really the moment the vault door creaked open. In late 2020 and early 2021, the rules got a massive upgrade. The credit jumped from 50% to 70%. But the absolute game changer was the wage cap. It went from $10,000 per year to $10,000 per quarter. That one little tweak meant the maximum credit just exploded from $5,000 a year per employee to a potential $28,000 in 2021. The stakes got so much higher practically overnight. And here's the fatal flaw. This is the piece that made the whole heist possible. Businesses were allowed to go back and claim this credit retroactively, sometimes years later. That meant that long after the worst of the pandemic was over, a whole industry could pop up just to mine these past quarters for gold. This wasn't a quick smash and grab. It was a slow, deliberate drain on the whole system. So you've got this unlocked door with billions of dollars behind it. What happens next? The scammers arrive. And they weren't some shadowy hackers in a basement. They were aggressive marketers who called themselves ERC Mills. And they saw a complete, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The floodgates were about to burst right open. You heard their battle cry everywhere, on the radio, on TV, all over social media. Claim now, nothing to lose. It was a super seductive message, but it was a complete and total lie. In reality, these businesses had everything to lose, the money they got, plus all the steep penalties and interest. This one phrase was enough to lure in tens of thousands of business owners who just didn't know any better. And their playbook was simple but just brutally effective. They promised easy money with almost no paperwork. They'd say pretty much anyone could qualify, usually using these really flimsy arguments about supply chain disruptions that the IRS leader made clear almost never counted. Then they charged these massive fees, sometimes up to 25% of the refund. And in the worst cases, they just made stuff up, inventing employees, inflating wages, anything to maximize their cut. Now, to really grasp the scale of what happened next, you need to know the original price tag. The government's official projection for the whole program was about $78 billion. I mean, that's a huge number, but it was budgeted for. But that is not what happened. Not even close. After the ERC Mills unleashed this absolute tsunami of bad claims, the final cost is now estimated to be somewhere around $300 billion. That's not just a small mistake. That's a full-blown catastrophe. I mean, just look at this. The program ended up costing nearly 4 times what it was supposed to. And this wasn't because it was just super popular with legitimate businesses. No, this massive jump was driven by a tidal wave of improper and outright fraudulent claims, all pushed by promoters who got rich off of our taxpayer money.
So by 2023, the IRS knew it had a massive crisis on its hands. It was like watching a dam about to break. So the agency completely shifted gears from just processing claims to playing detective and launched this huge multi-front war against ERC fraud.
You can actually see their response just escalate over time. At first, it was just some public warnings, putting ERC scams on their annual Dirty Dozen list. But by September 2023, they took the really dramatic step of hitting the emergency brake, a complete moratorium on processing any new claims. Then they offered a way out for people who'd been misled, and then began the long, hard work of audits and prosecutions that are still going on today. So, the IRS strategy really unfolded in 4 clear steps. First, stop the bleeding with a moratorium. Second, offer an escape hatch for those who made a mistake with a voluntary disclosure program. Third, start systematically denying all the obviously bad claims. And fourth, bring the full weight of the law down on the worst of the worst. And the numbers behind this enforcement effort are just staggering. The IRS has opened more than 545 criminal cases just for ERC fraud, targeting over $5.6 billion in suspected scams. And that's just one piece of the much, much larger puzzle of all the COVID-related fraud investigations. This is easily one of the biggest enforcement pushes in the agency's history. And we're not talking about small-time cases here. The largest scheme they've announced so far involved just 7 people who were indicted for filing over 8,000 false returns. They claimed a mind-boggling $600 million. They got about $44 million before they were caught, which they apparently spent on luxury cars, designer clothes, and jewelry. And if you thought that was brazen, get this. One scheme, which investigators actually nicknamed Operation Fraud Street Mafia, was partially run by an inmate from inside his prison cell. His network filed for over $500 million in fake credits, and the money they did get went to private jets and lavish parties. You can't make this stuff up. So, where does all of this leave us? Well, the party is definitely over, and now comes the hangover. The fallout from this scam is going to be felt for years, not just by taxpayers, but by the thousands of business owners who got caught right in the middle of it. For any business that took one of these questionable ERC payments, the consequences are severe. They have to pay back every single dollar plus interest. They're looking at accuracy penalties of 20% or even more. They are now at high risk for a painful, really time-consuming IRS audit. And for anyone who knew they were committing fraud, prison time is a very real possibility. That whole nothing-to-lose promise, it turned out to be a very, very expensive lie. So what's the big takeaway here? It's an old lesson, but it's one that just cost the country hundreds of billions of dollars. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. For any business owner who claimed the ERC, especially if you used one of those high-pressure promoters, getting a second opinion from a trusted, independent CPA isn't just a good idea. At this point, it's absolutely essential to avoiding a financial nightmare. And all this leaves us with one final, really crucial question. We know another national crisis is going to happen eventually. When it does, how can we provide that fast relief people need without just opening the vault to fraudsters? What have we learned from this $300 billion heist that can actually protect us next time? That is the challenge this whole story leaves for all of us.